All right. Good morning, MilSpouse Creative Community. Thank you for joining us and tuning in for another Crushing MilSpouse Influencer interview with Abi Ray from Legacy Magazine. She is the creator of Legacy Magazine, Army wife, mother of one, beautiful baby on the way, and her husband just left. So she is a busy woman. I appreciate you so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Moni Jefferson, and we are going to take you into what brought about Legacy Magazine and how she's making this all work as a military spouse. Welcome, Abi. Welcome to the community.
Thank you, Moni. It's so good to be here. I'm glad we could connect and have this interview. Thank you for asking me to be here.
Of course, girl. First of all, when I saw something one day and I was like, what is this, Legacy? First of all, I love the word. And so I was very drawn to it. And then drew me more. It was about military life, and it seemed very airy and like real and genuine, and I was like, oh, let me do a little bit of research. So I started doing a little bit of research. I said, I have to talk to this chick. Like, I need to figure out how this came about, how she's doing this as a military spouse. So I'm really excited you're here. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're stationed at, how long you've been a military spouse, and all of that fun stuff.
Wonderful. So my experience with the military, or my journey, began back in about 2008, 2009, when my husband and I had the chance to reconnect over a shared love for whitewater kayaking. So we had originally grown up together in the Mid-Ohio Valley when we were kids, but had lost connection around high school, college time, when his family moved away and I went off to college. So I was in New Jersey, of all places, at one summer, 2009, working at a camp for kids. I was a counselor using my degree, and my husband happened to be in the same town, the same time. He was just a friend at the time, whitewater kayaking. So we reconnected, and then over the next 11 months, we corresponded via, Facebook and email, and while he was deployed. But Legacy was inspired back in 2012, after my husband and I had got married, and he was feeling led to re-enlist. So it was time for him to decide if he wanted to pursue a different career or if he would like to remain in the military. And, after we spent some time thinking and praying about it, we decided that re-enlisting was the way to go. And this is when I felt inspired to pursue ways in which military families' lives could be enhanced and enriched. We believe there's a lot of media out there that, talks about the challenges and the struggles, and while those are very real and very important to explore, we wanted to highlight things that were exciting and the benefits and the community. We've discovered over the last several years how rich community can be within this demographic or this culture if you invest in it. So that's kind of where the dream of Legacy came to be. And then it was while working with some military spouse organizations and veterans that the idea of turning our collective ideas and experiences into a magazine came to life. So
how exciting.
And today we're making that a reality with the help of the community. So
that's amazing. What were you doing? So you said your spouse was already active duty. What were you doing before you married into, did you come from a military background? Is this all new to you?
Yeah. So I have both of my grandfathers were military. Several of my uncles, my brothers in the military. My father did when he was younger, before I was born. He did a few years in the military. So it's very much part of my extended family. And then we grew up in the VFW, running around in the local VFW. That was very common with our grandfather. So it wasn't something I had necessarily expected, but it wasn't also something that was too surprising to me.
Right. But the adjustment for you, because you were coming from civilian life, right?
True.
You're like, what is an ID? You probably knew what an ID card was, but you were, as a spouse, you were like, well, why is this so important? So was it like mind-blowing, like not mind-blowing, but like was it a culture shock for you at all to go from like civilian to an active duty spouse?
It was definitely adjustment. So the seasons of separation, those were a big adjustment. I would love to have my spouse home 24/7, you know, well, maybe not 24/7, but I would, you know, obviously love to have him home longer periods of time. So that was an adjustment. And also so I'm a counselor as well. And with counseling, you require licensure for every state that you move to. So that's been a long process. In the 6 years that we've been married, we've moved 3 times, 3 different states. So that means 3 different licensure processes. So that was another kind of like adjustment. But there's some big changes happening that are making those experiences easier for military spouses. So I'm thankful for those.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are happening in our community that I think that are making our life easier. So I'm really excited to hear the transitional phase of, you know, you brought up the fact that you're a counselor. So let's talk a little bit about that. Were you always a counselor? Did you always have your own side business, your hustle? Were you always an entrepreneur, or did you work for somebody else?
Okay. Yeah. So I had pursued counseling in undergrad, psychology. And then in 2000, I finished up undergrad in 2009. And then in 2010, decided to pursue a graduate degree in counseling. And then in 2011, I decided to put an emphasis on how like personal, professional, and relational experiences relate to the military culture, because there are certain experiences that we have that are significant to our culture, or at least emphasized or highlighted in our community. So it was around that time that I decided I wanted to have a private practice. And so that my parents are entrepreneurs, so that's something they work with nonprofits. So that type of work has always been on my heart. And then there's been seasons where I've worked for agencies and other social organizations that have, well-being at the center of their.
Wow. So you have such a vast experience. So the entrepreneur blood runs through your veins, which is really great. And it's just so exciting to hear that you've continued it as a military spouse. What have been some of your challenges being an entrepreneur, moving 3 times in the last 6 years, starting this magazine? What are some of the struggles in the journey as a military spouse while your member is still serving our country?
Yeah. So we recently had a contributor for the magazine explore the art of change. And in her article, she explained how change has a way of displacing and disconnecting. And while not all change is undesired, it still takes away something that is and gives something new. So that's something that really resonated with me and really hit home on my personal experience. So while a lot of these changes of like going from, a safe college student, with very few worries into, running my own business and, finding clients and bringing on employees, while those were uncomfortable at times, it was important for me to recognize that I had a need for self-care and quiet time. I think a lot of the times when we're faced with uncomfortable situations or moments of fast transition, we kind of just want to keep our heads down and just bulldoze through the experience.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, but in those moments, I think that what's been important for me is getting quiet, getting curious, and then asking for help in those moments. So really recognizing my limitations as a human being, and then reaching out to my community, reaching out to my husband, not just trying to bury all of those emotions and feelings and concerns, but actually sharing them. because I find when I'm able to share like my discomfort, in a healthy sense,
Right, right.
that it helps me move past it and move through it.
It's like you find comfort in sharing the discomfort because it's kind of like out there. You've said it, it's uncomfortable, but like I feel when you do share it, somebody says, you know what, I went through that, or I feel the same way. And you're like, yes, I have somebody that feels the pain, the discomfort, the struggle, just like I do. And it helps you. I think it helps us transition through the changes. I love that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think when we don't talk about certain things, we tend to ruminate on them.
Yeah.
And that just takes a lot of mind and time and energy. And that's when we could be using that time and energy for more productive things.
Right. Exactly. Like making coins.
Right. Exactly.
So tell me, how do you guys manage like your day to day? I know for my household, when I started my business almost 2 years ago, because before I wasn't working full time, I had to really adjust our household, like chores, schedules, activities, what time dinner usually was done, things like that. So tell me a little bit about like how you guys balance, your work life. Do you get up in the middle of the day while you're working and go fold a load of laundry? Do you block schedule? Like what makes it work for you? How do you work it out?
So definitely communication, and communicating with my husband early on was vital. Being able to talk about like our hopes and our dreams, whether that came to raising a family, also having careers that were intentional careers. So communication was the first step. And then when my husband is required to be away for extended periods of time, my instinct, of course, is to overwork myself, to distract myself. Because that's easiest.
Girl, I am there right now.
I feel ya. I feel ya. But I've realized with my daughter transitions better when I am moving at a slower pace. So those first week or two, I will take less time working and do more fun activities so that her transition's a little smoother. And in exchange, my husband will, when he's home, will take her out on little adventures and set up, daddy-daughter dates with her so that I can, push through a little harder than normal. And then also another thing that helps is like I get up from 5 to 7 when he's gone and do, my most important tasks for the day because my daughter's still asleep. And that I tend to, when I have my morning routine done, I just feel like I can conquer the day. And then you said
start doing that again.
It's harder than it sounds, but when you get into the routine, it's hard to get back in the routine if you've gotten out of it. But when you're in it, like it helps, I think. And then you mentioned folding clothes in the middle of the day. So I've realized that when I'm folding clothes, when I'm, dusting, when I'm doing dishes, which is my least favorite task, dishes, I will listen to a podcast or I will listen to an audiobook that I find encouraging and challenging. And that allows me to multitask and to feel like I'm, achieving a little bit more than just...
You're still creating.
Absolutely.
In a way, right? I love that.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it that way because I always felt like, and a lot of the spouses that I have spoken with, they're like, I don't do any households. Sorry, I'm like fidgeting. They straight up will say like, I don't do anything. I stay in my office. These are my work hours. And then when I'm done, then I'll do laundry or whatever, fold clothes or whatever. But I love the way that you've, instead of making it like kind of like a task, you're saying, I may be doing something to benefit the household that needs to be done. But at the same time, I'm taking time to also invest in myself by listening to a podcast or an ebook that adds quality and allows my creativity to still keep flowing. Yes. I love that. Oh, yes. I hate that.
Yeah. And I think it's finding what works for you or what works for you in that season.
Yeah.
So different things might work for different people.
Yeah. But I feel like the way, like nobody's ever said it that way. They're just like, that's household stuff. This is not, you know what I mean? So you've put like a really great spin on it. So I may start doing that and not feel bad. Because I always feel like, I have to stop to do this. And then but I'm not working. But if you are listening, like I just started listening to Gold Digger by Jenna Kutcher. Girl,
I've heard such good things.
So addicted. I've only listened to 2 and I can't, like, they're so intense. I'm like, oh my gosh. They're so good. So maybe I'll just start doing
that would be, because I find myself, if I find a good podcast, like I don't want to do anything else but like listen to it. I'm like, wait a second, I gotta apply some of these tips and tools.
Right. So what I try to do when I listen to the podcast is I will try to implement some of the tips and tools. So Jenna Kutcher's first podcast was about like branding yourself on Instagram and why it's important to share like who you are and only take away a couple of them and share it completely on there. So you're not sharing everything on Instagram. So I did that. I was like, this is amazing. Well. Thank you. Thank you.
I do. I love your branding and what you put out. The content I feel is very valuable.
Thank you, Abby. That means a lot to me. You never know if what you're doing is affecting your community in a way that you wanted to. Yesterday on Instagram, I shared some emails and messages that I've received about the MilSpouse creative community. And sometimes when you think things are going bad or people remove themselves from the community, you're like, why? But then you get messages saying, thank you so much. I needed this. I'm learning something. And that to me is what community is all about. And I'm sure that's what you're doing with Legacy. Like you're building a community for people to share that and to share their journey in a positive, encouraging way.
Right. And that reassurance and that recognition, like having that kind of gives you that motivation to keep going. Like, okay, this is giving something to the community. So that's always such a necessary thing to recognize.
Right.
So
oh my gosh.
Someone reaches out to tell you that.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. So what are some of the hardest things you find transitioning as a military spouse and an entrepreneur?
The hardest things, the uncertainty would probably be one of the hardest ones of not knowing the outcome. So I think a lot of the times we want to know what our end result's going to be before pursuing something. You know, that's a little more comfortable than just going in at it blindly. But I think a lot of the times when we just put our attention into the experience and the process, the end result's just going to happen how it's supposed to. So I've been making it a point to, rather than focus on the outcome, focus on the process, focus on the day-to-day, the experiences, the community, the lessons learned along the way. And then when it comes time for the end, it's just way more fulfilling and way more worthwhile.
Right. So like not trying to control everything, like trying to stress out about every little thing.
Yeah.
At all.
So that's harder said than done.
It is, because I'm an A personality. What type of personality are you?
I'm A.
It takes an A to run stuff. I'm just saying, like.
It does. You're right. It does.
I'm an A type, so for me, I try to like have a time schedule. I have a calendar. I have Trello. Like I have all these tools I use so that I'm like, I feel like I'm in control, but inevitably I'm not.
Right.
We're fooling ourselves.
Right. Well, no, I mean, it's good to have a hand in the steps, right? But not stressing about the end result, I think allows us to remain present for the tasks at hand. But I'm definitely for like, being intentional, being involved in your goals and, making sure that you're following through. But I think if we don't stress about the end, we stay present, and the start to finish, what's in the middle is more successful. Mm-hmm. And then therefore it gives us a better end result.
That's amazing. So let me ask you a question. You said you did counseling. Mm-hmm. That's so you have the counseling and now you have Legacy. So you actually or like you're wearing multiple hats all the time, like we all are.
Yes.
Do you?
We love that in this community for some reason.
We do. So do you split your time, like working? Do you have hours to work on your counseling? Do you have hours to work on legacy? How do you work that out?
You mentioned block scheduling, and that's something I love. And different seasons call for different approaches to that, for me at least. So block might be 4 hours a day, or it might be 4 days a week, or it might be 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely block schedule. That has been very vital in staying on task. So I will either block my first 4 hours to do these things, and then my last 4 to do these, or I'll even do the first half of my week for, private practice clients, and the second half for creativity with the magazine. So I call myself a counselor and a creative. And so counseling is marked under counseling, and then the creativity is the magazine and, the community. So I do block, and that tends to help, because I realize when I have 100 to-dos and they fall under so many different categories, that can get overwhelming. So when I can turn certain things off, that's good.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And I actually learned about block scheduling for one of my very first interviews with Lakeisha Cole. And she was
okay.
I was like, what the heck is that? Where have I been? And it's funny because every interview that I have, I'm educated in some way. I'm inspired by a story or a word or a phrase. I mean, all of the spouses are so unique, but we are all running in the same direction, right? We want to be successful. We want to create passive income. We want to have more family time. We want to put quality products and quality things out into the universe. So I love it all. I love it all.
We couldn't agree more. And that's kind of the inspiration behind and motivation behind Legacy, is like, we looked at this community and we're just inspired. And it's like, let's showcase that, because it's just beautiful. And there are so many things that so many women within this community that have to offer. So it's like, let's do all we can to get that out there to others.
I love it. I love it. So do you and your husband, like, how do your boundaries work with like date night and family time and holidays? Do you guys set weekly boundaries or daily boundaries? How does that work?
So we are big on unplugging on nights and weekends. So that means turning off phones, plugging them in another room. And it's hard. It's hard to not check emails if you're waiting to hear back from someone on a certain client or a certain article. It's so hard.
It is.
But, right.
You're like, he's in the bathroom. Let me see if I can check.
You won't know I picked up my phone.
Yeah, if he's in the shower, it's like, go check real quick.
Could you maybe help Tegan with this? That's our daughter, no. So it's hard, but we found after time, we're way more refreshed to do the work that we need to do when it comes time to work. And then we're way more present for each other. And that's way more rewarding than, checking that phone 10 more times. But that's a process. Like, we all, if we're type A, we can all be a little workaholic and,
and love it.
Right.
Like get a hot tea and my laptop in the bed and have my Netflix on, or like my wine. And I'm like, ooh, this would look good like this. And you're like, my husband would be in the bed and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh.
Oh, you're here. Hey, honey.
You want to look at this branding board or
like, this is great.
And it's funny because when he leaves work, he unplugs. He's
right. It's much easier.
Exactly. And I try to explain that to him, and he's like, but he feels like he's being neglected, or the kids, or the house, or whatever. And I get that, but I'm like, but when you have to stay at work late, there's nothing I can do. So if I have to work, and who said that in an interview? Annette Maldonado. She said her husband had mentioned to her one day, you're working late. And she was like, when you're working late, I don't say anything. You work late for the man. When I'm working late, I am the man, and I have to work late. And so I don't want to hear it.
That's a good point. And there will definitely be moments like that. There will be deadline. There will be, or there will be someone needing something from us. So I definitely think you make exceptions for those moments because it's true. It's when you can literally remove yourself from work. That's a lot different unplugging than your home being your office.
And when you're creative, it's even worse. Because you're like,
you never know when inspiration will hit. You don't know.
You're like, oh, we should put this here or that or have this. And it's crazy. You can't turn it off.
Right. One thing that sparks something that I do, I use Evernote on my phone, and that's one app that I will allow myself on any time of the day because it allows me to create to-dos, or if inspiration, like if I'm writing, if it's some kind of like intro comes to me, I'll write it down. I will allow myself to do that. So I do think that's important because things can come and go from us.
Yeah.
So that's very important. Another fun thing that we really like to do is we love tiny houses. So those
gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so those like 500 to 200 square feet homes. And while like that's not realistic for our growing family, we like to travel to them. So when we travel, rather than doing a hotel, we'll get a tiny house to enjoy for the week or the weekend. So that's another fun
I love that idea.
It's been a lot of fun. I think we've stayed in 5 different ones so far. So
that's really cool. I might have checked that out. That would be fun.
You can find them on Airbnb. There's some unique ones with really cool styling too. So
that's cool. Well, I have a family of 5. Would we fit in there?
Well, some. You might want to do it maybe when you and your husband travel alone. That might be more realistic.
Yeah, right? Okay. Well, I'm going to look into that. I love that.
The kids would love it, though. It's like it could be like a fort or a tree house in their minds.
Right. I mean, my kids are all about camping and stuff like that. So they would really think that's super cool. Oh, my gosh. All right. So tell me 3 tips you would give a military spouse creative entrepreneur who wants to start a business, maybe be a counselor or start a magazine.
Okay. So the first one is identify your strengths and really learn to employ those. So I think a lot of times we like to do it all. And there are seasons where we will have to kind of wear multiple hats and do multiple things. But I think there comes a time where when we can really utilize our strengths, we find more fulfillment and more success in that. So that goes into my second one, which would be recognize your limitations. So we're all human beings, and we're not meant to do it all. There's a beautiful community that we all have access to. So in finding your strengths, identify what you're not passionate about and outsource that. Yes. Or collaborate, which is something that you and your community is so passionate about, is collaboration. And that opens so many doors.
It really does.
Doors. And then which leads into my third is find your tribe and invest in them. So I think a lot of the times we go into a new project or a new endeavor thinking, what can I get? What can I get from this person? What can I get? But approach it the opposite way. Like go into it from day one, investing in others and highlighting their strengths and what they're doing. And I think that their investment will just come back to you naturally.
It does. I agree with you. I absolutely love that. You're absolutely right. And that's what this community is all about. It's about collaborating. Right now, in a way, you're collaborating with the community because you're sharing some insight and inspiration and tips on how to get it done. Where sometimes when people of your, I'm not going to say magnitude, but like that you're doing it, right? Like that you're actually doing it. So many people say they want to do something and they don't do it or they're fearful. Mm-hmm. But watching somebody like you guys that are doing it and having you come on here and really sharing like your struggles, what works for you, what doesn't, and just being very transparent, not just saying, oh, use a scheduler, do this, do that. You're just really sharing quality insight as to what gets you through it. It just allows for so much growth and, like you said, collaboration. So in a way, you're doing that already.
Well, thank you. And thank you for creating space for that in this community.
Oh my God. So important. It's my pleasure. It really is my heart. I actually, I'll tell you the story another time, but
Okay.
it's kind of long. But yeah, that's the reason this community exists. So, all right, lightning round, short answers. This is meant to be fun. So
Okay.
share with us, what is a talent that nobody knows about you?
Okay. So, I'm extremely skilled at killing plants.
And you wouldn't get that because you think.
So yes, I know you said skill, but it's become a skill of mine. I would love to have a green thumb. I really would. Like my grandmother, but it's been a long process coming. So I'm working with succulents and cactuses because I hear those are less likely to kill. So that's an unfortunate skill I have.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Oh, mind reading. I think that would be really cool. So, funny story. Sometimes when I introduce myself and share that I have a background in psychology, the individual will go, so what am I thinking right now? And I have to remind them that psychology is different than being psychic.
Right.
It always makes me laugh. So I think if I had a superpower, it'd be mind reading. That'd be cool.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny. And what is like your favorite downtime activity?
Reading and writing, definitely, which is probably part of my inspiration for the magazine. I just love to get lost in a narrative. And then journaling or creative writing. Those are definitely two of my favorite pastimes.
Do you have like a million journals? Yes. I have, just look at I have 3 right here.
That's phenomenal.
Why?
That is me. But my planners turn into journals sometimes. Do you ever have that?
Yeah, so here's the other thing I have.
Yes, that is so me right there.
Why?
Wait,
a paper.
Was that a power sheet?
Yeah, so yes it is.
Oh, I love her. I love Laura.
Do you have?
I do. So I have the 6 month. So I'm hoping in January to get the 12 month.
Yeah, I have the 6 month too, and this is my second month.
Okay.
But I had to create like a whole listing on the back because I volunteer and I have 2 businesses, and I'm like, I need like a place to list. So that worked out good, that empty page. Are you working on this today?
Yes. I actually started, so I have the first 4 done, but I need to finish the rest of them before the end of the day or tomorrow.
Yeah, this is on my list. So I'm choosing grace over guilt about housekeeping.
Hey, amen. I am right there with you. Right there with you.
I used to be such a better housewife when I didn't have a job, when I didn't have a business.
Right. Well, naturally, we had a little more time.
Yeah, we dinner's done at 5:30. Everything's clean. We can enjoy Saturday and Sunday. We don't have to do anything because mom took care of all of the chores. And now it's a whole different ball game.
It's a different season, which calls for different approaches.
Yeah, and I'm really glad. I'm glad where it's at. I'm really glad. Yeah. So tell me the last thing I want to know. What is one of your biggest pet peeves?
Oh, pet peeves. Okay. Let's see. Probably when you're asked a question and then interrupted in the middle of it. So maybe not giving. And I think that's kind of like the counselor in me. With counseling, you do a lot of reflecting of what the other person has said. So I'm very quick to pick up on if someone is really just asking a question to kind of give their own advice or something. So maybe that would be the first thing that comes to mind. Oh gosh,
I probably interrupted you 5 times.
You haven't actually. No, and there's a difference in conversating and communicating where something is sparked, but I'm thinking more of very intentional and conversations, maybe even conversations that are a little maybe conflict oriented. I think in conflict there's a time to listen, and then there's a time to voice your opinion. So
Right,
But I
right.
felt like this felt very natural, this conversation.
Okay. Whew. I'm like, oh man. Awesome. Well, let's get into your plugging round. I want to hear what you have going on in the next few months, where we can find you, how we can connect with you, any specials or anything you have going on as far as counseling, if you're taking new clients, if you are accepting sponsorships and things like that for your magazine. We want to know everything.
Okay. So I definitely offer counseling and coaching to women and families, and all of that information can be found at legacytherapy.org. And I have signups and specials and offers on there. And then if you're wanting to connect with us over at Legacy Magazine, you can do that at legacymagazine.org. We're a brand new print publication, and we'll be launching this fall. So we're working on our fall and winter issues right now. We are working with writers, photographers, artists, creatives, so if you're one of those individuals and would like to contribute to whether that's online or in print, we'd love to hear from you. We have a submission page on our website at legacymagazine.org. And then we'd love to connect with you on social. So we're Legacy Mag on Instagram, and then on Facebook you can find us at Legacy Magazine. And then my personal Instagram is abi.ray. So I do a lot of personal things there, and I throw in some counseling as well.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining us. Any last words?
This has been fun. I appreciate, and I'm so excited to be a part of your community, Moni.
Awesome. We're happy to have you. And once again, Milspouse Creatives, thank you for tuning in and joining us. Make sure to reach out to Abby if you want to be a contributor for Legacy Magazine, if you want to pick her brain about how she started this business. If you have any questions for her, make sure to reach out to her, show her your support. That's it. The number one thing we can do for each other is show up. And showing up means sharing, liking, commenting, and just being there for Legacy and for Abby. So I'm glad you guys tuned in. Thank you again, Abby, for joining us. And we'll see you guys next time on another Milspouse Influencer Crushing interview. Bye.
Bye.